Well, greetings, my friends. I hope you're all doing well. I'm looking a little bit scruffy today. It's Sunday. On Sundays, I only do three things. I study, I meditate and pray, and I work in the yard. My favorite things in the world. I live in the South, so working in the yard right now gets you a little bit scruffy, gets you a little bit dirty, so I don't look my best. But you know what? As time goes on, and I see more and more of these independent media sort of spaces people have like full-on studios and everything's all pretty and perfect, the more I want to rebel against that, man, and just stick as just a dude on a camera with poor lighting. I had actually been trying to get more and more professional, but now I feel myself wanting to go backwards, man. We got rid of corporate media for a reason. I have no desire to try to mimic the fakeness of corporate media. But that's for another conversation for another time. For right now, talking about The Mind of Hermes, Visionary Experiences in Western Esotericism. This is by Mark Stavish. This is part of the Institute for Hermetic Studies Study Guide series. These books, there's a monograph series, and I believe there's one other series that IHS puts out with these really relatively thin books, very easy reads. They're transcriptions of public presentations that Stavish has put on in the past. Mark Stavish, the head of the Institute for Hermetic Studies. It's interesting. As a quick note, when I first discovered these, I thought of them as just kind of like light supplementary material to like the heavier studies. As time goes on, I return to these more and more. There's something about this format that is very worthwhile, and I find like I discover new things every time I return to these books, and I find I return to these books more and more often. But anyway, and so today I'm going to discuss the book. However, I'm not going to go into details. I'm not going to plunder it for all of its contents, because that's not cool. I'm not going to pirate somebody else's material. But I'm going to go over a few highlights, a few major points of the thesis in the book that I found applicable to my own life, and that I want to share with all of you to, number one, maybe help your own lives, but number two, to encourage you to check out the book, because it's a dang good book, and I do encourage everybody to read it. And the great thing about these books is because they're so simple and they're so thin, like you can get these pretty cheap. I'm pretty sure most of them are still under $10 on Amazon, which is, for nowadays, that's amazingly affordable, we'll say. I'm not supposed to say cheap. Cheap has a negative connotation. But anyway, it's an excellent little book presentation that Stavish put on. I'm not going to share these in specific, but there's some really good meditations in there. Some really good general kind of simple base level meditations that you can use for your life right away. Really easy stuff. And easy goes to one of the points that I want to talk about from the book, something that I already started applying to my life like the moment that I read it in the book. And something that I think is worthwhile for everybody to consider. Because in the book, Stavish continually returns to this concept of relaxation and taking things easy. And he talks about, when you discuss focus, like if you say you need to sit down and focus on this practice, on this meditation, on this prayer, and whatever the operation is that you're doing, I tend to think of focus as being kind of like an intense thing, like putting all of your mental energy intensely onto a single point, putting all of that mental focus onto one little thing. But Stavish makes the point that that's not really what it is. It's more of like a relaxed focus, to where you allow your mind to kind of broaden and open up and become more aware. And that's incredibly valuable. That is an incredibly valuable reminder for studies, meditation, prayer, but just life in general, right? So when you become like hardcore focused, it's kind of like a tunnel vision, and I think it does serve its purpose. Like especially if you're in a fight, if you're defending your life or something like that, you do need that, right? Like that has a purpose, but we should not confuse it with the kind of focus that is being referenced when we're talking about spiritual or philosophical practices, right? That kind of focus is more of a relaxed focus, right? It's more of a broadening of the mind and a softening of the mind. And I find that it was a very useful reminder for me, because I'm kind of naturally wired for intensity. It's just how I am. And Stavish makes a really good point that is not the optimal state that you want to be in these things. But he also makes a really interesting point that also applies to my own life, where he said, when we go out searching for things in general, but in this case specifically spiritual understanding, wisdom, knowledge, enlightenment, however you want to say it, there is a very much a tendency, and this is very true in myself, there is a tendency to want, how does he describe it? We want like a heroic effort, right? Like we want to go out and we want to overcome incredible odds and to show our mettle, and to show our strength and our courage and kind of be heroic in how we overcome these obstacles. And Stavish kind of amusingly makes the point that, yeah, that's all fine and good, but it's not actually necessary, Like if that's the way you want to go about it, that's cool. And this is Stavish's point. If that's the way you want to go about it, that's cool, but it's not actually necessary. Like when you actually get down to it, a lot of these things are very simple and they can be grasped in a very easy and relaxed manner. And that was very that caused like a really powerful insight into myself, because I didn't realize how much it is tied into my mind that I do believe like anything worthwhile in life should be had with a quote unquote heroic effort. Like I don't even like things being given to me easy. Like I want to earn everything that I have. And you know what? Stavish's book kind of made me ask, well, why? Like why? And I don't know. I mean, if I come to the answer, I'll say I don't know if it's logical or rational. I don't know if I'll be able to determine an appropriate response for that. Maybe it's just my wiring, and maybe it's irrational, and maybe it's even holding me back. It's just something I'm going to have to consider. And if true, apply, or at least attempt to apply. Very interesting insight, though, if you really think about it. Maybe we don't have to work as hard for everything as we think we do. And if that's true, how much faster could we make progress, Like, I don't know, that's a very interesting insight. I'll be thinking about this for some time. Point number 2. We are here to help people, but not to save them. Now, this is a point Stavish returns to quite often. And again, it's something that rankles me a little bit, because in a lot of my natural wiring, I do want to like save people, right? It's just in me. Like when the people, my friends and my family, when something goes wrong, like I put it all on my shoulders. That's not really rational. And in a weird way, it's actually disrespectful, because it's actually kind of diminishing their own path and their own personal power, right? Now, it's different if they come to you and they say, hey, I need this specific thing to help me with this, right? Stavish says we're here to help, but not to save. Now, a big part of Stavish's point in that is that if you're trying to save everybody, you're just going to burn out all of your energy, because there's always going to be an infinite number of people that need to be saved. And we have a limited capacity, no matter how powerful we become. So it's kind of like, Jesus with the lepers in the Bible, like you can only do so much. Like suffering's always going to be part of the world. In the Bible, I think it actually says like the poor will always be with us, or something like that. And so, yeah, Stavish talks about it from more of like a practical, personal perspective. But for me, it triggered some thoughts that made me really kind of look inside myself and realize that, what, I do think I'm being a little bit disrespectful by thinking that I need to save the people as though I'm some kind of like savior to them, right? Like my intentions are good, but it's just kind of arrogant, And the book really triggered those thoughts in me. I think it's a worthwhile thing, and I share that not to talk about myself, but for any of you out there who may have similar inclinations, just something to think about. Every human being, man, we're all divine sparks, right? We're all in the image of God. We're all fractals of God, and so to assume that people need you to save them, I don't know. I think that's kind of diminishing them, and I think it's kind of disrespectful to them. And I think there might be a little bit of an ego power play in there, no matter how virtuous of a place it feels like it's coming from, So that's a useful thing. And then, guilt. This was the biggest one. Stavish makes some really interesting points about guilt. And Stavish's point is that, his point as I interpret it, it's always possible I get it wrong. I don't think so, but maybe I do. So Stavish's point, as I interpret it, is that we go through this life and we have all kinds of decisions that we can make, all kinds of approaches to life that we can make. And Stavish makes the point that we're all built in a certain way. And something I really like about Stavish's approach, and I like it because it's a conclusion that I came to before even encountering Stavish's work. And so to find somebody who is as much further along the path than I am as Stavish who can validate this, I appreciated it. But this idea, like the negation of the ego, like I want to dissolve my ego and just be, part of the one. Stavish isn't for that negative, the negative enlightenment, I think is how he refers to. He's not for the dissolution of the ego. Neither am I. Yes, we are all divine sparks, divine expressions of the divine and of God, but we're individuals. We're unique. Like we were put here as a totally wholly unique collection of impulses, desires, dreams, ideas, fears. Like we're not meant to just become dissolved like Borg into this, nebulous mass of gaseous indifference. Like we're supposed to become the fullest and best and most virtuous expressions of our unique being, right? And so he makes the point in there, it's not about destroying the ego, it's kind of like about taming the ego and softening the ego, but not getting rid of it, and in fact magnifying the best parts of it. But coming back to guilt, and so he makes the point that, we go through our lives doing that which is to our nature, right? But then after we do it, a lot of times we then second guess ourselves, right? Because we think, well, but that's not what the main paradigm says I should do. Now, I want to say, I interpret this personally, and I can only speak for myself. I interpret it kind of loosely, because I do believe there are some things that are just plain wrong. I mean, hurting a child, yeah, that's just wrong, right? I want no debate about something like that. Hurting a child is wrong, right? Hurting a partner is wrong. These things, they're just wrong, right? And so, but there's a lot more gray area and a lot more nuance in there. My interpretation of what Stavish is saying is a lot of times we go through our lives, and I just want to reiterate again, that's my interpretation, because I think Stavish might actually take it a little bit further. Stavish is pretty adamant from what I've seen him talk about these things, and he kind of laughs at the impulse of do-gooders or whatnot, which is funny because Mark Stavish is a really good guy. He is. So whatever he says, don't let that detract from his own character. And that's an interesting thing about him, actually, now that I think about it. That is interesting. But anyway, and so it's more like, you make decisions and then you start looking at it from the social paradigm and your programming of what you think you were supposed to do. And then you start feeling guilty about it and you start beating yourself up. And the interesting thing is, the guilt, sometimes maybe guilt, or I do think sometimes guilt is a good thing. If you've done something objectively wrong, you should feel guilty about it and correct course, right? Now, once you corrected course, though, let go of the guilt. What's the point of holding on? Once you've truly corrected course, just beating yourself up forever does nothing but make you a martyr, But there are a lot of other things where we needlessly feel guilt, and we only feel guilt out of cowardice. That's the thing I really took away from the way Stavish was talking about this point. Because it's you have a way of going through life. This is our lives here on earth. We were built a certain way. There are certain approaches that we have to life. And to feel guilty about those things, unless you have done something objectively wrong, is really a form of cowardice. Because you're second guessing yourself because what you did does not conform to what you've been programmed to think you were supposed to do, or what the social paradigm says you were supposed to do. It really is a form of cowardice, of weakness, really. Because you're not owning up to yourself. You're not standing and saying, yeah, I made that decision. Right or wrong, I did that. That was my expression of my intent on this earth, my will. And yeah, I did that. What are you going to do about it? Right? That's a strong approach to life. A weak approach to life is oh, why did I do that? I can't believe I did that. Oh, I never should have done that. What if I hurt this person's feelings? What if I did this? What if I did that? It's really weakness. It's really cowardice. Like, it comes across as this virtuous guilt thing, but is that really what it is? I think a lot of times it's not. And that was a very powerful insight for me when I read that in this book. Again, Mind of Hermes, Visionary Experiences in Western Esotericism. Like, yeah, when I read that, that definitely will have me thinking, and it makes me want to approach my life differently, for sure. But anyway, and so those are 3 important points. But in there's also this interesting stuff. He talks about dowsing and the relationship of dowsing to your own psychic development. I found that really interesting. Like I said, there's some good meditations in there. Sorry, I'm not going to share the meditations because that just feels like poaching the material, and that's not the right thing to do. But there are good meditations in there. I think there was 3 or 4 really solid meditation experiences you can give yourself to expand your mind. And they're very simple, and they're very kind of like foundational. It's another thing he returns to in this book a lot: simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. We get too wrapped up in trying to do the next big thing. There's even an interesting part in the book where he talks about how it's silly to be worried about our progress, which I found really interesting. And that's one I'd have to fight with a lot, because that goes against my progress or my wiring. I'm the type of person I take ample notes on everything, to-do lists, very structured. But he makes some interesting points about how that's kind of a silly concern as well, just because that's not how we naturally progress. That's not how life unfolds before us, right? Not unless we are blessed, or one could say selfish enough, to retreat to some cave somewhere and just meditate for the rest of our lives and separate ourselves from human activity. As long as we're immersed in human activity, it's rarely going to move that easily, where we're going to be able to mark our progress in such a systematic fashion. But anyway, those are some things that I wanted to share. Mind of Hermes, Mark Stavish Institute for Hermetic Studies. It's an excellent book. And like I said, these things are so affordable, man. They're so affordable. You can get them for like less than $10. And I return to them all the time. The return on investment on these things is amazing. I'm a huge fan of these books, and so just encouraging everybody to check them out. All right, peace out, everybody.